Hi guys, today we're gonna go over everything I knit in 2022. Hi guys, welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Amy and my channel name here is Knits, and I love talking about all things knitting, and today's video is gonna be a hefty one. We're going over everything that I knit in 2022. So for this video, we're going over finished objects that I've knit for myself. I am not including things that I've knit as gifts or things that I've knit for my Etsy shop. So these are all personal finished projects for myself. I'm gonna go in chronological order by the time that I finish the project. So starting in January, going through December, I'm gonna go all over every project that I knit this year. So I do tend to knit seasonally, so when it's cold, I like to knit wool sweaters and heavier items. In the spring and summer, I'm more drawn to knitting patterns for t-shirts and tank tops. And then, of course, in the end of the year where it gets cool again, you'll notice that I get back into sweaters. So that's sort of going to be the cadence of today's video. I will put in timestamps for all of the projects down below, so if you want to skip ahead to a specific project, you can feel free to do that as well. So when I was going back through my knitting notes, I do store all of my projects in Ravelry, so it's very easy to document when I started and finished projects. So I had to go back and figure out what project was my very first finished object of 2022. I feel like when I finished this project, it honestly felt like a really long time ago, but it was in this year. So our first project that we're going to go over is my Oslo Sweater. So this is my Oslo Sweater. The pattern is by Petite Knit. Now I started this back in the fall of 2021, but it got finished in February of 2022. So it made the cut for this year. The Oslo Sweater is a drop shoulder design sweater. I believe it's a DK weight knit. I actually used 2 strands of yarn held together. So I used 1 strand of Sewek Yarns brand Tibet, which is considered a lace weight, but it is sort of a heavier chainette woolen yak combo yarn, and I held that with a strand of Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the color Rust. The color for the Sewek chainette yarn doesn't have a name, but it is color number 17, which is this orangey red, sort of red squirrel similar color. And I combine them both. The Rust color is definitely more red and the Sewek is more orange. So by combining 2 not exactly the same color yarns, I got this sort of marbling effect in the fabric, which I really like. I do really like the Sewek Tibet yarn because it's chainette. It is really light, but because it's made of natural fibers, it has great thermal properties while still being lightweight. Like picking up this sweater, it's not heavy at all. It wears beautifully. Now we'll talk about the construction of the sweater. It is drop shoulder, so I'll show you guys the back. So it's drop shoulder with these beautiful shaped increases along the back shoulder line. So you knit the back panel flat, and then when you get to the underarm, you pick up stitches along the front and you knit the front flat, and then you connect them all in the round for the body. And then when you're done with the body, you go back and pick up the underarm stitches for the sleeves. It has a slightly tapered sleeve, and then you go back and do the collar, which is a double folded 1x1 rib collar. Now, one really nice design detail that I like of this sweater is in the collar. Petite Knit is pretty famous for this design aspect, but she adds a pearl ridge right in the middle of the folded collar to sort of give it a defined folding point and sort of plump up the fabric. So a big fan of that. It is also pretty thick, like the collar length. I would say this is maybe like a 2-inch width collar, so lots of structure there. Also, I really like the design increases along the collar line. So you can see that it has these increases here, which I really like in crew neck sweaters. It just makes it seem more like professional and polished. And yeah, for my first finished object of 2022, I would say this is a really nice sweater. I wear it a lot. I would say I wore it more in the fall because at the beginning of the year in the January, February months, you know, I feel like this red rust color is not really in season. So when it got cold again earlier this fall, you know, this kind of giving me pumpkin spice vibes. So I wore this a lot in the fall. I wouldn't say I wore it enough to give it a good test for wearability and the fabric. Like, I'd have very minimal pilling, but I think minimal pilling is because I wore it not a lot of times. I did do tubular cast off for all of the areas. This pattern has a pretty wide 1x1 rib section for both the cuff and the edging to sort of match the thick collar. So overall, great knit. This is very oversized. I think I made the extra small size in the pattern, which is the smallest size that it offers, and it has a lot of positive ease. So I am going to insert clips. I might have already overlaid it of me wearing the items, but for me sitting here talking, I'm just going to hold them up so I can show you guys up close all the different details. So Oslo Sweater was sweater number 1. So the second sweater that I finished this year is the sweater number 9, and that is a design by My Favorite Things Knitwear. The sweater number 9 is a worsted weight knit, or it might be considered an Aran weight knit, that has a nice funnel neck collar. It's raglan construction, so top down, and it has 2x2 ribbing details, as well as, I believe, a 2x1 ribbing detail. You can see the collar here. It has 2 knit stitches and then 1 purl stitch for the rib design. So this I knit on 7mm needles as the pattern calls for. I did also use the suggested yarn for the pattern. So I used Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino as well as Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair. Both of the yarns are in their color Pearl Gray. Now, something about this color, I don't know why, but whenever I look at this sweater, I don't think of it as gray. It really strikes me as a light blue, a really pale light blue. I can't tell in the video today if it's coming up more gray or blue. Maybe I'm gonna say it looks gray today, but when I see this in person and when I wear this, maybe because I often wear it with blue jeans, the color leans really blue. So overall, it's a very flattering color. It's a very neutral color. When I was first knitting this, I wasn't a huge fan of the yarn combo. Knitting for Olive's Heavy Merino is a little bit on the rougher side compared to some other merino yarns that I've used, especially compared to superwash merino yarns. It just felt very rough. So when I was knitting it, even held with the soft silk mohair, it felt scratchy and itchy. And I wasn't really sure if I was going to enjoy wearing this sweater because it is also a heavier weight yarn. So the Heavy Merino is a worsted weight yarn, so then you hold it with the mohair, and that's why I said before I think it's an Aran weight knit because you're holding those 2 strands together. So the combination of the roughness of the yarn with the thickness of the fabric, I was like, oh, I don't know if I love this yarn combo, but we're just going to stick with it for the pattern. And I will say, having finished this in March this year and now we're in December, I've worn this a ton, and this fabric definitely softens up with wear. And I did block and wash it once. Maybe it needs one more wash and block, but this fabric is now one of my favorite fabrics, and I'm kind of eager to get my hands on more of the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino just because it is so nice. It just is so warm. It's the perfect thickness if you live in a colder climate. If you live in a warmer climate, I would say this might be on the heftier side. You might be only wearing this on like the coldest days of the season because it is really thick and it is really warm. But for someone like me who lives in Massachusetts, it's been a great staple piece. So let's talk about the construction and fit of this sweater. We'll start with the neck and the collar. So this is a gorgeous funnel neck piece, and the pictures of the pattern by My Favorite Things Knitwear, she looks fabulous in it. The high neck comes and sits, you know, right below her chin. It looks very classy, but for some reason when I wear it, the funnel neck is just too tall. I don't know, it like sits right above or right at my chin, and to the point where my chin kind of folds it down naturally. Maybe I just have a short neck. I know I also don't have like the most defined jawline, so this sweater is sort of teaching me that turtlenecks, funnel necks may not be the most flattering on, you know, my body shape with my jawline and neck length and such. So when I wear this sweater, I actually will fold the collar inward to sort of do this. So now it's only half the height and it is double layered, and that's how I normally wear it just because it sort of starts to do that naturally. So I just go ahead and do it, which makes me think that I should sew down the collar since I pretty much always wear it like this. I should sew it down just to make it even. Haven't done that yet, but that's my plan with this sweater. The raglan details on this sweater are really nice, and that's what drew me to this pattern in the first place. They are more of like a combination of garter stitch and knit stitches for the raglan increases, and it goes all the way around. Same with the back. This sweater doesn't have any short row shaping, so it's actually perfectly symmetrical. There's no like front and back side of the sweater. And I know the designer just came out with this sweater number 9 light edition, which is in a DK weight gauge. It uses the same raglan design, and I kind of want to knit it just because I do like this sweater, but it is super chunky and thick, so it's not necessarily for everyday wear. It is also a cropped design, so I knit it to the length that the pattern called for, and I would say even on me, I'm pretty short, it still is pretty cropped. Like, it hits right at where like my high-waisted jeans will fall. It's not long enough for me to tuck in. So if you are interested in making this pattern and you use the suggested yardage for the yarn, just keep in mind that the yardage is for a cropped length. So if you want it longer, make sure you get a couple additional balls of yarn. I think I knit up like all of the balls of yarn that the pattern called for. I did not really have any extra yarn, and I followed the suggested yarn amounts for this pattern. So yeah, sweater number 9, I would say this is a pretty good kind of beginner level knit if you want to get into garment knitting and you're sort of scared of something at a smaller gauge that has way too many stitches, because this is knit on 7mm needles. This flew by really quickly for me, and because it has the raglan shaping, I would say that's a good entryway into sweater knitting. Raglans are knit all in one piece. You can try it on as you go, and it doesn't have the complexity of short rows if you're not ready for that yet. So would recommend this pattern if you want to step into the sweater game. So my next object of 2022 is the April cardigan. The April cardigan is a pattern by Petite Knit, and I actually knit this in April this year. I just thought it would be fun to knit the April cardigan in April. So here it is. This is a really nice everyday cardigan. It is knit top down and uses a saddle shoulder construction, and it is knit mostly in stockinette and has 1x1 ribbing details as well as 1x1 ribbing border button band. So I knit this with Sandnes Garn Sunday in the color Cameo, held together with Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the color Champagne Rose, I believe is the name. So together it made a beautiful fabric. This piece actually made me fall in love with the Sandnes Garn Sunday yarn. It just is so nice to work with. Sandnes Garn Sunday is a fingering weight wool. It's merino but non-superwash. It knits beautifully and it blocks even nicer. Like, you can just see this cardigan, it's been blocked, and it's just so crisp. That's the only way I can describe it. Everything is flat and crisp. It has beautiful drape and flow, and everything just looks beautiful, and I attribute that to the yarn. So let's talk about the fit and construction of this cardigan. This is a more cropped cardigan. It has not a lot of positive ease, at about 2¼ inches to 3 inches of positive ease. I knit this in a size extra small. However, after having finished it, I made the decision that in the future I would be making all Petite knit patterns in size small, because this was just a little bit on the snug side for me. So this, like I said before, is a saddle shoulder construction, so I'll show you guys that up close. This pattern was an introduction to the shoulder construction for me. So if I hold out the shoulder here, you can see that it has this really nice vertical panel that has increases on either side for the front and the back. And then as you get past the shoulder for the sleeve, the increases sort of go symmetrically until you get to the underarm area where you have some raglan increases, and then you close off for the body and such, similar to a raglan construction when you get to the end, and separate for the sleeves. So I really liked it. I think it's a really smooth look. You don't have any harsh lines coming from like your neck down to the underarm as you do with a raglan, so it's more of a subtle shoulder construction, and I think it looks really nice. I had a lot of fun picking the buttons for this cardigan, so I just went to my local yarn store and looked at the button section with the diameter that was called for in the pattern. I think these are about 1 inch in diameter, I don't remember, but they're just really nice clear buttons that have a cute little floral detail, and that was just a lot of fun to add the buttons to the finished piece. When I wear this cardigan, there is some puckering at the underarm, like I said before. It's just a little bit too small, so that was just me not picking the right size for my measurements. But overall, I really like this cardigan. It's in a great color. I can just throw it on over any shirt. I don't often button it. I usually wear it unbuttoned, but it's also very warm and cozy. It's got the fuzziness from the mohair, and I did use tubular cast off for all of the cast off points, so it looks very neat and tidy, and I really like the 1x1 ribbing and how it has blocked and sort of stretched to the same width of the stockinette. You know, I'm not a huge fan of when the ribbing compresses on itself and makes a dramatic size difference from the stockinette portions, so another reason why blocking is important. But pretty wide ribbing section at the bottom. That was a little tedious, but not as tedious as the button band. I had to get a super long interchangeable needle cord to do this button band, and I had to pick up all these stitches and knit in 1x1 rib and then do tubular cast off for the whole button band. So end result, it looks gorgeous, worth it, but definitely a lot of work. I have seen some people make this pattern and do an adjustment on the button band, and they do the double knit sort of vertical button band that goes along like this, and it also creates a really stunning result. There's my April cardigan by Petite Knit. All right, so I knit that cardigan in April, so into the calendar, we're getting into May, and I started knitting some warm weather pieces, which is always exciting. So my next project is the Streamline Tank. This is a free pattern by Two of Wands. It's knit with Lion brand Kobu yarn, which is a half bamboo yarn, half cotton yarn blend, and this is knit on 4.5mm needles. So I knit this on the car ride down to Virginia to visit my sister for her college graduation, so fond memories associated with this tank top. I overall really like this. This was my first time knitting with Kobu yarn, and this project really made me appreciate the yarn. It is such a nice yarn blend, I think mostly for the drape and the structure of the finished piece. I'll show the stockinette up close. This is with 4.5mm needles, and I just really like the gauge and how it flows and how it looks. Lion brand has a lot of different colors in this yarn. I know they sell it at some Joann's. I think I've even seen it at Walmart, so pretty easy to attain. It's not that expensive, so Kobu would definitely be a top recommendation if you're looking for an affordable spring and summer yarn to knit with. I have heard there are some complaints that it is splitty. You know, it's not very tightly wound, and it does consist of a lot of little strands of yarn that might be splitty if you knit with them, but I didn't really experience many issues with that. You just can't really knit with it super blindly. It's just a little bit more attention needing than maybe your other woolen knits. So I would just keep that in mind if you are interested in this yarn. Construction for this tank top is bottom up. So you start at the bottom edge, you do the ribbing, which is sort of like a fisherman's rib there. So you do knit the row below to create those like plump ribbed stitches, and then you knit flat. So you're knitting the front panel and the back panel the exact same. So this is a symmetrical tank top, and when you get to the top part here, you sort of split into two sections where you knit the left side and then the right side, and then at the end you seam it all together. So you can see here I have seams for the shoulders and as well as seams for the side. And because this is a small tank top, I didn't mind the seaming. I do appreciate seams in knit pieces just because I know things stretch out over time, and seams will give extra structural integrity that you otherwise wouldn't have without them. So this one, I didn't mind seaming. I do really love the detailed front. I think that's what drew me to the pattern. I've also found this tank top to be very wearable. I wore this a lot over the summer. I think it's because it's very bra friendly. These are very wide straps that easily cover up my bra straps, so I found it pretty easy to wear. One thing that I would change is would make it way longer. This is really cropped on me, and I'm not the biggest fan of cropped tops. I tend to like to tuck in my shirts. So because this was bottom up, it was hard to sort of see where it was gonna fall because I couldn't really try it on. I think I just followed the pattern's directions for the length of the top, So keep that in mind if you are going to make this pattern. Following the directions makes a very cropped piece. So I would need some more yarn to add on to the end, but because it's bottom up, you have to add the length at the very beginning before you divide for the shoulders and the sleeve part. So great pattern by Two of Wands. I kind of want to make another one, maybe in more like a fun color, like a blue or pink for next summer. I think she created a sister pattern to this that is crochet. It looks very similar to this, but if you're interested and do more crocheting or want to get into crocheting, I would check that out. I think she also made another pattern that is knit, but a t-shirt version. So pretty cool family of patterns with this, you know, overall fisherman's rib design. It is really flattering, like the front piece here. Yeah, that was my first knit tank top of 2022. I do have another one. So my next camisole that I made for the summer is the camisole number 4 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. This is a gorgeous piece knit in Knitting for Olive silk, Knitting for Olive pure silk, and I chose the color olive for this tank top. I made the smallest size in the pattern, which I believe is an extra small, and it's supposed to have a little bit of negative ease. It starts top down, so you actually knit each of these triangular panels separately, and then you connect them all in the round when they're all done, and then you knit the body in the round until you get to the length that you want. Knitting for Olive Pure Silk is a fingering weight yarn. This was knit on 3.5mm needles in what's called a broken double rib stitch, which is really textured. The pattern designer claims that it looks similar to crochet, so if you're into those crochet tank top looks, this is a knit alternative that has a similar finished look. So I really enjoyed making this. People say that is sort of like a drag when you get to the body because it's knit with fingering weight yarn and you're doing ribbing, and I will say it definitely takes a lot of attention and energy to get it done, especially if you want it on the longer side. So I enjoy knitting with the yarn. I don't love the pure silk. I don't really know why. Maybe I just don't really think it's worth the price. Maybe I prefer cottons, I think, because they're just softer. This does have a lot of drape. It looks really nice. The fit of this camisole wasn't my favorite. It's a little bit more exposing than what I'm used to wearing, and it's not really bra friendly because you have these really thin straps, and the underarms do dip pretty low. I also had some issues blocking it because the front triangle panels are actually knit wider than like the width of the tank top, if that makes sense. Like if you've knit tank tops before, you might have done like a top-down triangle construction where you have 4 triangles, 2 for the front, 2 for the back, but the width of the 2 triangles put together is the same width as the 2 triangles that you put together for the back panel. So like the triangles will end right at the midpoint at the underarm in sort of a very symmetrical way. I hope that makes sense, but with this pattern, the triangles are wider than the width of like the front of the panel, so they kind of extend to the back. You can like see that it's not a symmetrical ending point. Hopefully I explained that well, but because of that, I had difficulty blocking it on my flat blocking boards because the edges sort of had to fold under, and I didn't really want a fold line. Like the fold line would have ended right here, and I didn't really want that. I also found that the garter stitch edging right at this front panel didn't really flatten out like I wanted to, even though I did wet block it. And I could have tried it again, I just didn't. So that could also be on me and not blocking it correctly, but I feel like it doesn't look as polished as it could. You can kind of see like the ruffling of the edges here. It was a pretty easy pattern to follow with the 4 triangles at the beginning. Before you connect them all, you have a lot of ends. You have a lot of stitches on waste yarn and stitch holders, and it seems pretty chaotic. It does come together pretty easily, but just keep that in mind. It's like kind of a chaotic start that then eases out towards the end, and you do have a pretty amount of ends to weave in. Another note is that it uses I-cord straps. And I don't know, I find I-cord annoying. Maybe you don't, but for me, I-cord is one of those knitting things that I don't really look forward to, especially on tiny needles. So it took a while to do the straps. I also have a hard time keeping track of how many rounds I'm doing in an I-cord. So, making sure these straps are the same length was not like the most fun. And then on top of it, so the biggest thing that I have with this tank top is it really stretched out after I started wearing it, especially at the straps. And the pattern does warn about that, but I don't know, I feel like it didn't warn about it as much as it actually stretched out. So after I wore this, maybe just twice, the straps got super stretched, and therefore like the V-neck coverage of the tank top got way too low for like my comfort level. So I actually stopped wearing this because I wasn't comfortable, with this much exposed, with how much these straps stretched out. Now, that is something I can easily fix. All I have to do is snip off the I-cord, undo a little bit of it, and then reattach it. But I don't know, sometimes the smallest tasks get put off the most, and I just have not gotten around to doing that. Maybe when the weather gets warmer next year and I am eager to wear this again, I will fix the straps. But for now, it kind of was just sitting in the bottom of my knit drawer. Overall, beautiful piece, beautiful design. I think I'm more into bra-friendly summer tanks and tops, so when I get into my summer knitting this year, I'll definitely be looking for more patterns that have wider set straps and not necessarily these thin I-cord straps. The next piece that I made this year is the Riley tee, which is a pattern by Rachel Kurihara of Rachel Knits Things. This tee is a boxy cropped drop shoulder tee. It is knit top down. It's knit on 4.5mm needles, and for my yarn selection for this project, I used Lion Brand's Comfy Cotton Blend in the color Silver Lining. So Comfy Cotton Blend, I found at Joann. It was super affordable. It's a 50% cotton, 50% polyester yarn. I only used 2 cakes to make this tee. I think each cake has around like 700 yards of yarn, so great value for what you're buying. And overall, this project was a lot of fun to knit. It was my first t-shirt of the year. I was super drawn to this pattern because of the ribbed detail on the shoulder, which I'll show you guys here. And so this is a twisted rib stripe that goes from the shoulder down the sleeve, kind of gives it like a sporty look. And it is pretty boxy and supposed to be sort of oversized. I really like this yarn because it has kind of like a tonal effect, which actually comes from the 2 strands of the yarn, the half polyester, half cotton. Each of those fibers picked up dye differently, so in general you kind of have a 2-toned yarn that when knit throughout creates this cute like speckled effect or sort of tonal effect that I really like. Other things that drew me to this pattern were the folded collar and like cuff details. So where some patterns will have ribbing, the pattern designer did folded hems, which I think look really classy. I'll show you the back here. So you have some nice shoulder shaping. It's kind of slanted with short rows here, and the sleeve, there's actually 2 options on knitting the sleeve. I did the longer option, but the pattern does give instructions on how to make like a shorter, more like cap sleeve look that's maybe about like this long. So super nice, well-written pattern. The pattern does call for a DK weight hand-dyed yarn as the suggested yarn. I think this pattern, mostly stockinette stitch, pretty plain cut, really shows off hand-dyed yarn. If you have any in your stash, I would love to reknit this in a DK weight merino yarn, just because I think you're gonna get better drape than the cotton polyester blend that I used. One thing that I learned when knitting this piece is the importance of understanding yarn density and yarn weight. When you look at a yarn label, you'll be able to see how much the yarn ball weighs and how much yardage you get for that weight of yarn. And if you're substituting yarns in a project, that is a very key factor in addition to making sure that it's the right category weight. So you could have a DK weight yarn like I used here, but the density of the Comfy Cotton blend is way higher than a density of a superwash merino blend. So because of that, this knit is really stiff. You can see it doesn't really move around that a lot. The fabric feels very thick. Even though I did meet gauge with the suggested needles in the pattern, I think the needle size I used is maybe too small for the yarn because of how stiff the fabric ended up. It was kind of difficult to block out. I wish that the ribbing on the shoulder sort of blocked out more evenly. You can see like it still compresses on itself, whereas a wool or a lighter weight yarn might have stretched out more and sort of opened up that ribbing pattern. I found this t-shirt kind of difficult to wear because of how heavy and thick it was in like the warmer weather of the fall and the warmer weather of the end of the summer. It just was too heavy to wear, but by the time it was cold enough to want to put on as thick of a fabric as this, I wanted to wear long sleeves and not short sleeves. So kind of an enigma of a piece. Like I didn't really wear it that often, even though I really enjoyed knitting it. And I really like the end result, which is why I think I'm probably going to reknit this at another time when I have a better suited yarn for the project. One last note on this project, this is a cropped tee, so the pattern calls for you to knit the body to a specific length, and when I knit it to that length, I found it was way too cropped for my liking, so I actually added 3 additional inches of fabric to the body just to make it hit more at my hips and less at my waist. So again, keep that in mind if you want to knit this project. The yardage required is for a cropped fit, so if you're looking for something longer, you will need to add some yarn to your sweater quantity or to your t-shirt quantity. Okay, this next project I'm really excited to share because I was keeping it a secret for a while. I don't think it's on my Instagram page at all. If not, there's maybe one post about it because this was a gift for my fiance. I knit the zipper sweater man as a wedding gift for my fiance, who's now my husband, and our wedding was in August. So I started this earlier in the summer and finished it by August so I could give it to him. Now, this zipper sweater man is a pattern by Petite Knit. She also has another pattern called zipper sweater, which is made for women, although, you know, you can interchange it however you would like, depending on the style. So I knit this in Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino, held together with Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair, both in the color Dark Moose. I believe the pattern calls for Sandnes Garn Frigid's Garn for the men's sweater, which is an Aran weight, very woolen, easily feltable yarn, and I had felt that in person and it was too scratchy to me. I don't know, I just didn't really want to knit with it. So I went on a mission to find a good substitute, and I settled on the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino, mostly for its color selection. It had a very wide color selection and I thought it would meet gauge, but I ordered it and then I swatched it up and it did not meet gauge with the suggested needles and all that. Like, I tried stretching it. It was too tight. I tried stretching the swatch to fit the right measurements and it just wasn't going to work. If I increased needle size, it was going to be too open. So I was like, okay, I already have the sweater quantity of the heavy merino. So I ended up ordering the soft silk mohair lace weight yarn to hold together with the worsted weight heavy merino, and that together helped me achieve gauge, even though now his sweater has mohair, which I don't know if he loves, but I think he's been growing to appreciate the texture of the fabric. The zipper sweater was a big challenge for me. I was learning a lot of techniques I'd never knit before, including, you know, creating a panel for the zipper to be sewn in. There are German short rows in here. Although the concept of a raglan was not new to me, it was really nice to add these fun features to a sweater. And overall, I really enjoyed knitting this. I knit this with 5mm needles, so it knit pretty quickly compared to my smaller gauge projects that I usually have, and it's mostly in stockinette. The collar is knit in 1x1 rib. Very nice. You do have to knit the collar in this like huge rectangle that's twice as long as this area because it gets folded over, so it was kind of tedious, but once I got through that, it was pretty smooth sailing with the raglan. It has nice 1x1 ribbed cuffs as well as 1x1 ribbing at the bottom of the sweater. For my husband, I made the size medium and it fits him pretty well. One thing I noticed with the zipper sweater man is that the positive ease amount is a lot less than the zipper sweater pattern. So there's more positive ease in the zipper sweater than the zipper sweater man. So I was looking up, I want to make one for myself, and I was looking up the measurement comparisons, and pretty interesting. The finished, you know, bust circumference of the zipper sweater that would fit me, like a petite knit size small in the female version of the pattern, is actually the same bust circumference as like a men's large zipper sweater, which kind of blows my mind, but the zipper sweater for women will be knit to a shorter length, whereas the men's were pretty long. I followed the directions of the pattern pretty much to a T, except for the sleeve length. As I was knitting the sleeve, I thought it was getting too long. I was following the directions for the suggested length, and my husband is not that tall, so I was like, I don't want the sleeves to be super long. And so I actually cut off a few inches or like a few centimeters of the sleeve length. And turns out I should have followed the pattern instructions because when he tried it on, the sleeves hit at about the wrist. Like, I don't think it's that noticeable that they're short, but I can tell that probably would have been better to make them a little bit longer so that he would have the flexibility of the cuff, you know, going over the wrist and having more space there. But other than that, it was a great fit. You know, keeping this a surprise, I couldn't really have him try it on at all. Let's talk about adding the zipper. So first of all, finding the zipper was difficult for me. I really love the metal zippers that Petite Knit sells on her website and uses in her zippered patterns, but I didn't really want to order one online and pay the extra money for the shipping. I thought, oh, let me find one at my local craft store instead. So I went shopping and I found it very difficult to find metal zippers. Maybe it's just where I live and the craft stores I went to, but they only had plastic zippers and they didn't really have any brown colors, so I went with black. I thought it was the closest match. So I think the plastic look, you know, it's not the best. I would prefer metal. I may actually try and swap out this zipper in the future if I can get my hands on a nice metal zipper. And sewing it in definitely took some time and was a little bit out of my comfort zone because I don't really sew. I did it by hand and it's not the neatest. I'll show you guys up close. You can see it's not the neatest, so I would like to redo it just to make it a little bit neater, but it wasn't too difficult. She had very good instructions. There are video instructions as well. This is very like practical, no issues with the zipper opening or closing, so I did block this, and I blocked it with the collar sort of, I think I blocked it with a zipped up, so the collar was blocked like this. And my husband has mentioned that he would prefer if the collar folded over because it doesn't really fold naturally because it is doubly thick. You have like 2 layers of fabric here and a pretty bulky weight yarn. So it doesn't fold over that naturally. So I think I may reblock it and reblock it with the zipper open so the collar can sort of fold and sit flat like that. So undetermined if the blocking will work completely, but I definitely think it will help it prevent from standing straight up on his neck. My husband has been wearing this a lot since it got cold here in the fall and the winter, so in terms of seeing some pilling and wear on the fabric, we have seen some. Definitely need to get one of those like electric fabric shavers just to clean up some of the fuzzies. You can see at the underarm point that there are some there, but overall I would say that's expected with a knit piece, nothing dramatic, and I think a fabric shaver will fix that up really quickly, but he has been wearing it for less than a year and there is already some signs of pilling, so just something to keep in mind. The next project I have to share is my Cambria Wrap. And this one has been like a fan favorite. You guys have loved this and I think that's awesome because this is a free pattern, so you guys can knit this if you so desire. It's a free pattern by 2 of Wands on her blog. You can also buy like a PDF version of the pattern if you want to carry it around ad free. Don't have to reload the page, but I knit this. I was super interested in having a very oversized triangle wrap / scarf for the fall and winter. So I knit this wrap with Lion Brand woolies and the color oatmeal. I use 6.5mm needles as the pattern suggests. That's a needle size that's considered a little bit larger than what the yarn calls for, and the pattern designer describes that as on purpose, so you have more of an airy, drapey, flowy fabric than if you used a smaller needle size. So this is a triangle wrap, so it actually started here. I attempted to use the garter stitch tab cast on, which is a special type of cast on specifically for triangle wraps that have like a garter stitch border, and it creates like the absence of a gap that might occur if you did not use that cast on and if you just used a regular cast on. So you can see here that that is where the garter tab cast on started. So overall, that was a new technique to me. I really like the finished look. So you knit it like this in a triangle shape, so there are increases down the middle as well as increases along the edge. And then overall, you keep increasing until you get this giant wrap. I'll try to show the whole thing on camera. But it's just really gorgeous. Like, there are different panels of stitch patterns that go throughout the whole wrap, combined with the triangle shaping creates this nice sort of chevron V structure, and it looks really nice. It's a great way to practice your lace knitting if you're completely new to lace knitting like I am. This is, very beginner level. You have yarn overs combined with knit stitches and purl stitches to create all these beautiful sections of fabric. And then she also gives instructions on how to make tassels for the end, which I really think complete the piece. I have worn this a ton since the weather got cold. It's been a great thing to throw over my coats or any sort of sweater I'm wearing. I feel like it instantly elevates an outfit because it's very oversized and it falls over my shoulders very streamlined like, and just adds an extra piece of texture to the outfit that I'm wearing. The yarn that I knit this in is a 80% acrylic, 20% wool blend. So it is mostly acrylic, and I'm normally used to knitting with natural fibers, so going back to acrylic was a little bit different for me. However, I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for something affordable and easy to knit, and it does have very nice drape once you block it. I found that steam blocking it really opened up the stitches and the fabric. Before it was steam blocked, I was kind of skeptical that I would enjoy this wrap just because it was very bunchy and didn't have great drape, but the steam blocking really helped. So when in doubt, you gotta block it. So yeah, this is my Cambria Wrap. Big fan of this one. All right, so now we're entering my sock knitting era. So I knit socks for the very first time this year, meaning I completed my first pair of socks this year. I've actually had a couple attempts at knitting socks that failed, got frogged, and made me discouraged from knitting socks. But I got some 9-inch circular needles, which I was convinced was gonna help me knit socks because I don't like DPNs. Magic loop is a necessary evil. I don't love it, but sometimes you gotta use magic loop. And I knit some socks, or tried to knit those socks in magic loop, and didn't enjoy it. So I was like, all right, let me give circular needles a try for socks. And that really opened up my eyes to enjoying socks for the first time. And I actually finished my first pair in the fall. So I knit these vanilla socks, which is a free pattern by the Crazy Sock Lady. I knit these with 2.5 millimeter circular needles, US 1.5, I believe, is that same size. So 9-inch circular needles. These are top-down socks that have a slip stitch heel flap, and then you go on to decrease for the toe. This beautiful yarn is Mary Ann's Sock by Frabjous Fibers in the color Serendipity. It was just this gorgeous, drew my eye at the yarn store, hand-dyed berry red color, and I just really love how it knit up. It had no pooling at all. Was super soft. This is a 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon sock yarn, fingering weight. So I've actually machine washed these multiple times and hung dry them after I wear them. So they've held up great. I knit the size small from the Crazy Sock Lady vanilla sock pattern. So these have 56 stitches for the cast on. And I just followed the video tutorial and have been really enjoying wearing them. So that was my first pair of socks. While I'm here, I'm just going to talk about my second pair of socks that are knit in East Coast Yarn Co.'s Oh My Gourd fingering sock yarn. Similar 80-20 merino nylon blend. This colorway was from her fall collection. Has oranges, teals, and this cream. I did get some pooling with this yarn, which I talked about in one of my podcasts. But I don't really mind the pooling because these are just, house socks. They're super warm. Also have been machine washed. So yeah, I'm definitely a sock knitter now. If you watched my last podcast video, I showed you 4 different socks that I knit for Christmas gifts, and I got some plans for more socks on the way with some new sock yarn that I got. So very excited about my socks. The next thing that I knit is the Polo Sweater. This is a free pattern by Caitlin Barthold of Originally Lovely. She has this pattern free on her blog as addition in addition to being able to purchase the PDF pattern. So if you're interested in a polo sweater, which I think is kind of trendy right now, then feel free to check out this pattern. I really enjoyed it. I knit this with Lion Brand Collection Superwash Merino in the color Mushroom, which is this really nice sort of chocolatey but warm brown. The construction of this top is raglan, so you start flat. You shape the neck and the V-neck collar until you join in the round, and then you have classic raglan increases for the sleeve and for the body. There are no short row shaping rows in this pattern. There is the concept of a compound yoke, so the increases for the body and the sleeves actually go at a different rate. I added the collar pretty shortly after I connected for the body in the round, just so I could better visualize how the finished piece was going to look. The collar is double knit, so it's very thick. It has these nice increases along the back line to help shape the polo collar style. And this is the length of the collar according to the pattern. If you wanted to make it longer, you could. You can sort of visualize how, it's not the longest collar. One thing I notice when I wear the sweater is that the back does fold up. Even though I did block it with it folded down, it does naturally pop up a little bit. So I think if I were to make this again, I would make the collar longer just so it has more fabric to help weigh it down with the folding and help maybe prevent it from folding up like that. I did make the V-neck half the length that the pattern calls for because I didn't really want a very deep V. So I just followed the increases for the V-neck until about halfway through the number of repetitions, and then I connected in the round and then continued on until all the raglan increases were finished. So that was the one major modification that I made to this pattern. Some aspects of this pattern design that I really love are the twisted rib details. So you have twisted rib along the sleeve cuff, as well as the bottom edge is all twisted rib. Yes, it was tedious, but totally worth it. I did also do tubular cast off for all of the edge pieces, so they look really neat and tidy. I didn't really love working with this yarn, the Lion Brand Superwash Merino, because the yarn itself had like a lot of stretch. So as I was knitting, the yarn would like stretch on the needle, and I felt it hard to keep accurate tension, as well as, when it does stretch, the yarn itself gets thinner. So that was my one complaint about the yarn. So I'm unsure if I would knit with it again. However, the finished fabric that this yarn created is absolutely lovely. So that would be the one reason why I would get the yarn again, because the finished fabric is just so nice. It has so much drape. It's DK weight, but it's kind of a lightweight DK. So it has really nice like breathability and flexibility. It feels really nice on the skin. I find this, not too chunky where it's like too bulky to wear, but it also is not so thin that when I was knitting it, thin knits sometimes take a while and can feel tedious, but this was pretty straightforward to knit. There is some pilling that you might be able to see on the fabric because I have worn this a lot. Maybe at the underarm. I don't know if you guys can see. There's a little bit of pilling, but nothing major. So I would say this has been well loved, and it's going to be continued to be well loved throughout the seasons as I wear this. This pattern does have faux seaming involved, so along the underside of the body, continuing down to the edge, as well as the underside of the arm, you actually create space to add faux seams, which add structural integrity and is an extra finishing step that you have to do after you're done knitting the piece. So you actually use a crochet hook to sort of make chain stitches along those areas of the project. That was new to me when I knit this piece, and it was kind of tedious, but I think it is going to help prevent this piece from stretching out. This superwash merino yarn did stretch out a lot after I blocked it, so as I was knitting it, it did seem pretty snug, pretty close to zero, maybe even like negative ease, but after blocking it, it really opened up and has the perfect amount of ease that I wanted in the project. So that was all due to, gauge swatching and seeing how big the gauge swatch grew after washing it. So definitely important to follow the gauge swatch if you are knitting this pattern with this specific yarn. All right guys, we're almost at the end. I have 2 more things to show you. My second to last piece that I knit this year is the Friday Slipover V-neck. That's a pattern by Petite Knit. It was my first slipover, and I also really enjoyed this pattern. I think in general this year there really weren't any patterns I disliked, just maybe things that I learned that I would, you know, apply to my future knits. So my first slipover here is this beautiful broken rib slipover with a nice V-neck design. It has 1x1 rib details, and I knit this with Sandnes Garn Sunday in the color light beige, held together with a Surrey alpaca nylon blend fingering weight yarn called Plymouth Yarn Surrey Stratus in the color taupe. Now, I said in some of my earlier videos that I didn't really love the Surrey Stratus because it was an alpaca nylon, and a lot of people recommended trying Surrey silk, and now I'm totally open to that. I do think the reason why I didn't like the Surrey alpaca was because it was a nylon blend and not a silk blend. So I'm not anti-Surrey like I might have implied in my earlier videos. I think I just need to try Surrey silk, which is supposed to be like a nicer blend and be softer than silk mohair, which I really love. So this vest was knit on size 4mm US 6 needles, and it has the broken rib pattern all over. Some aspects that I really liked were the shaping details at the underarm. You can see those increases, you know, beautiful, symmetrical, very nice. The 1x1 rib sleeve as well as a 1x1 rib v-neck, really nice. I really liked the bottom point of the v-neck. She has pretty clear instructions on how to make that nice mitered corner, which is super crisp and clean. One thing about this pattern is there is no like real intense design shaping with the v-neck, and what I mean is like you kind of just increase for the v-neck without paying attention to like how the stitches flow compared to like the increases right here. I think I would have preferred if there were like nicer increases along this v-neck edge. That would be my only thing that maybe I would try to modify or look for like a different pattern if I were to recreate this v-neck pattern. This vest does not have a ton of positive ease on me. I made the size small, and I think I'm learning that if I were to make a slipover again, I think I want more of like an oversized baggy slipover. And I've mentioned that the weekend slipover v-neck that has that sort of oversized look is on my queue to knit this year. So hopefully I will get that done and sort of do a compare and contrast of, you know, like smaller positive ease vests compared to larger positive ease vests. So this pattern here, really nice to knit and definitely a nice layering piece for the winter. All right, we're on to my last piece, and I think I've been speaking faster about these, you know, projects near the end compared to the projects at the beginning. So I think I'm eager to wrap this up. Hopefully you guys are still sticking around. But my last finished piece of 2022 is the Shift Cowl by Andrea Mowry. This is a gorgeous flat knit mosaic self-striping piece that has already been worn this winter. I just wore it over the weekend, and totally different than my other knits. You know, I had all those neutral solids, but this was just an explosion of color and texture, and I just really enjoyed knitting this. Now, this cowl is knit flat, and then you seam up 2 edges in the back here to create this shape. I knit this with Shopwell's Edition 3 wool, which is a 100% wool sport weight self-striping yarn. It is very similar to the Spin Cycle Dyed in the Wool, which is the yarn called for in the pattern design. And when you use the self-striping yarn with the mosaic knitting combination, you get this beautiful sort of marbled textured striping effect that is going to be unique for every knit piece you make. I feel like it's pretty difficult to replicate something like this exactly. This cowl has a lot of I-cord edging details as well as being knit on the bias, which is why the stripes are diagonal, which I think is a great addition to the design. I would totally make this again. This is just like a great layering piece to throw on before I throw on my coats to go outside. It adds color, it's very flattering around the neck, and you know, adds warmth. You got to think of the practicality of the knit piece. I use my Sorella wool wash to block this, and it still smells really nice. Smells really fruity, which I enjoy, especially when it's like close to my neck and I can like smell it. It's like, oh, nice little addition to the piece. All right, we made it to the end. So that is everything that I knit this year. I cannot wait to see what 2023 will bring in my year of knitting and expanding my skills and patterns that I have made. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys at the next video. Bye.